mob enforcer stood over Bruce Lee at a funeral and said, "I could break you in half, little man." Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look up. He simply whispered something that made the enforcer's face go pale. What he said was never reported in any newspaper, never mentioned in any biography, never spoke about in any interview. But the 200 people who witnessed it that day, they never forgot. Some still talk about it in hushed voices decades later, and what happened in the next 48 hours changed the San Francisco underworld forever. This is the true story the media buried. The story his family kept quiet for decades. The story that proves Bruce Lee's greatest strength wasn't his fists. It was something far more dangerous. Something that made grown men think twice. Something that turned enemies into students. Something that proved you don't need to throw a single punch to win a war. Before we begin, type RESPT in the comments if you believe real power doesn't need to shout. And tell me, where are you watching from? I want to personally thank every single person who values honor over violence. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about Bruce Lee. It's about what happens when a man who's mastered fear faces a man who only knows how to inflict it. It's about the moment silence became more powerful than any scream, and it starts at a funeral where nobody expected a war to begin. It was a cold February afternoon in 1967, San Francisco's Chinatown. The sky was gray. A light mist hung in the air, the kind that doesn't quite rain but soaks through your clothes anyway. The funeral was for Master Wong Jack Man. Not the martial artist you might be thinking of, but a different Wong Jack Man, a respected elder in the community, a man who had helped dozens of immigrant families find work, settle disputes, stay out of trouble. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's name, who kept a jar of candy for the neighborhood kids, who mediated arguments before they became violence, who loaned money he never expected back. When he died at 73, the entire community mourned. Hundreds gathered at the temple on Stockton Street. Incense smoke curled through the air, thick and fragrant. Silence filled the room, except for quiet weeping and the soft shuffle of feet on old wooden floors. Red and gold banners hung from the ceiling. White flowers surrounded the altar. Photographs of Master Wong in his younger days sat beside burning candles. Bruce Lee arrived alone, no entourage, no press. No cameras following him around like they usually did. Just a simple black suit, perfectly tailored but understated. His hair neatly combed back. His expression calm but heavy with respect. He had known Master Wong for years. The old man had once told Bruce, when Bruce was still struggling to make a name for himself, "Your fists are fast, but your heart must be faster. Strength without wisdom is just noise." Bruce never forgot that. He'd written it down in one of his notebooks, repeated it to his students. He stood near the back of the temple, head bowed, hands folded in front of him, eyes closed, paying his respects, honoring a man who had taught him more than any punch or kick ever could. The ceremony continued. Prayers were chanted. Family members wept openly. The air was thick with grief and reverence. That's when he walked in, Vincent, Vinny, Marcello, 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle and arrogance, slicked back hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than most people in that room made in a month. Enforcer for the Lanza crime family, known for shaking down businesses in Chinatown, collecting protection, money from restaurants and grocery stores, making people disappear when they didn't pay or when they talked too much to the wrong people. He walked in like he owned the place. Loud footsteps that echoed off the temple walls, expensive cologne that cut through the incense smoke, gold rings on every finger catching the candlelight. His presence was like a stain spreading across clean fabric. People moved aside, not out of respect, out of fear. Mothers pulled their children closer. Shopkeepers looked at the floor. Even some of the younger men, the ones who acted tough on the streets, suddenly found something very interesting to stare at on the ceiling. Vinny scanned the room with cold, calculating eyes, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't here to mourn. Everyone knew that. He was here to be seen, to remind everyone who really had power in this neighborhood. Then his eyes landed on Bruce. His smirk widened. He elbowed his associate, a thin man with nervous eyes and a cheap suit, and muttered, loud enough for others nearby to hear it, "That's the Kung Fu guy, right? The one from TV." The associate nodded quickly. "Yeah, that's him. Bruce Lee. He's got that show, Green Hornet. Looks like a kid. I could snap him like a twig." A few people glanced nervously at Bruce, then quickly looked away. But Bruce didn't react. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the altar, focused on the ceremony, focused on honoring Master Wong. His breathing remained steady, his posture unchanged. But those who knew him well, those who had trained with him, sparred with him, watched him teach, they saw it. The slight tightening of his jaw, the subtle shift in his breathing pattern, the way his hands, folded in front of him, pressed just a fraction harder together. Not fear, not anger, calculation. He was reading the room, reading Vinny, reading the energy, reading the threat. Vinny walked closer, his shoes clicking against the wooden floor with deliberate, heavy steps. He stopped right next to Bruce, invading his space, towering over him. He leaned in close enough that Bruce could smell the whiskey on his breath, and whispered with mock politeness. "You bow pretty low for someone who thinks he's a tough guy." Bruce said nothing. The room seemed to hold its breath. Vinny grinned wider, enjoying the moment. What? No kung fu talk, no fancy moves, no what ta sounds. Still, Bruce remained silent, perfectly powerfully silent. His eyes stayed forward, his breathing stayed controlled, his presence stayed grounded. But those who knew him, those who really knew him, understood what was happening. Bruce Lee was choosing peace, not because he was afraid, but because he was dangerous. Before we continue, comment below BLW or FGHT. What would you have done in Bruce's position? And shout out to everyone who understands that silence is sometimes the loudest response. The ceremony ended slowly, respectfully. The final prayers were chanted. The last sticks of incense were lit. Family members bowed one final time before Master Wang's photograph. People began filing out, heads down, moving in quiet clusters, whispering about what they'd just witnessed. Not the funeral, but Vinny's disrespect. Did you see how he stood there? Right next to Bruce Lee, of all people. No shame, no honor. This is what Chinatown has become. Outside, Grand Avenue was crowded with mourners. The mist had turned into a light drizzle. People opened umbrellas, pulled coats tighter, gathered in small groups under awnings. Some were heading to a nearby restaurant for the traditional reception meal. Others were simply lingering, not ready to leave, not ready to let go of Master Wang just yet. Bruce walked quietly through the crowd, nodding politely to those who greeted him, accepting condolences, offering his own. He moved with purpose but without rush, heading toward his car parked 2 blocks down on Stockton Street. His mind was already shifting, thinking about Linda waiting at home, about the classes he needed to prepare for tomorrow, about the script revisions his agent had called about. That's when Vinny and 2 of his guys stepped directly into his path. They formed a wall of expensive suits and cheap cologne, blocking the sidewalk. Vinny stood in the center, hands in his pockets, that same arrogant smirk on his face. "Hey, Bruce Lee." "Yeah, I'm talking to you." Bruce stopped, looked up calmly at the man towering over him. His expression was neutral, not afraid, not aggressive. Just present. "Can I help you?" Vinny laughed, a loud, performative laugh meant for the growing crowd of onlookers. "Help me? Nah, but maybe I can help you. See, I've been hearing a lot about you lately. The fastest man alive. The guy who can punch through walls. The little dragon." He leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "But you know what I think? I think it's all Hollywood bullshit. Wires and camera tricks, movie magic." A small crowd began to form. People stopped mid-conversation, turned to watch. Some pulled back, afraid to get involved. Others moved closer, curious, sensing something was about to happen. A few pulled out cameras. This was 1967, no phones, but some had small Kodak Instamatics, the kind that were becoming popular for tourists. Bruce's voice stayed even, controlled, almost gentle. "If that's what you think, then there's nothing I need to prove to you." "Oh, but I think there is." Vinny stepped closer, closing the distance, using his size to intimidate, towering over Bruce by nearly 8 inches. "See, you're making people around here think they can stand up to guys like me. You're on TV playing a hero, and suddenly everyone wants to be Bruce Lee. You're giving them ideas, bad ideas, and I don't like that." The rain picked up slightly. Water dripped from awnings, splashed on the pavement, but nobody moved. Everyone was watching now. Vinny's voice got harder, colder. "So here's the deal, little man. Right here, right now, you and me. No cameras, no tricks, no stunt doubles. Let's see if your kung fu is real, or if you're just another fake playing dress up." The crowd gasped. Someone whispered a prayer in Cantonese. An old woman shook her head and looked away. Bruce didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give Vinny the reaction he was fishing for. He simply said, very quietly, so quietly that people had to lean in to hear, "If I fight you, one of 2 things will happen. Either I'll hurt you badly, or I'll humiliate you, and neither of those outcomes will teach you anything." Vinny's face flushed red, anger replacing the smirk. You calling me stupid? I'm calling you blind. Bruce's voice remained calm, but now there was an edge to it, not aggression but clarity. Truth, you think power is about size, about fear, about making people shrink when you walk into a room. But real power, real strength, it's knowing when not to fight. It's understanding that violence is the easiest answer, not the smartest one. Vinny's jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. So you're a coward. That's what you're saying. All that kung fu talk, and when it comes down to it, you're just a coward. The word hung in the air like a curse. Some in the crowd looked away, embarrassed for Bruce. Others waited, holding their breath. Then Bruce smiled, faintly, almost sadly. No, I'm just not interested in proving something to someone who already made up his mind. Then Bruce did something no one expected. He reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, so Vinny wouldn't think he was reaching for a weapon. And he pulled out a small red envelope. A lycée, a traditional gift of respect and good fortune, usually given at weddings and funerals, containing a small amount of money as a blessing. He held it out to Vinny. This was for Master Wong's family. But I think you need it more than they do. Vinny stared at the envelope, completely thrown. What the hell is this? A reminder. Bruce's voice was quiet, but carried across the silent crowd. That respect isn't taken, it's given. And right now you're surrounded by people who would never give it to you, because you've never given it to them. You walk through this community like you own it, but all you really own is their fear. And fear isn't loyalty. Fear isn't respect, fear is just temporary. The words hit like physical blows. Some in the crowd nodded slightly. Others looked at Vinny with new eyes, seeing him not as powerful, but as pathetic. Vinny's hand trembled, with rage, with confusion, maybe even shame buried deep under years of violence and posturing. He snatched the red envelope from Bruce's hand and crumpled it violently. Then he threw it on the wet pavement, where it landed in a puddle. You're dead, Lee. You just don't know it yet. You think this is over. This is just the beginning. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You embarrassed me. In front of all these people. And nobody embarrasses Vincent Marcello and walks away. Bruce held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The crowd parted like water, creating a path. And Vinny stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard, surrounded by witnesses, realizing he'd just been defeated without a single punch being thrown. Drop it in the comments if you think Bruce just played the smartest move of his life. And tell me, would you have walked away, or would you have fought? That night, Bruce sat in his small apartment in Oakland, across the bay from San Francisco. It was a modest place, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, walls lined with books on philosophy, martial arts, film technique. A small punching bag hung in the corner. Training equipment scattered by the window. He was sitting at his wooden desk, sipping jasmine tea from a ceramic cup, reviewing handwritten notes for his next class at the Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute. His wife, Linda, was in the other room reading a novel, classical music playing softly on the radio. Their son, Brandon, just 2 years old, was asleep in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. It was quiet, peaceful, normal. The kind of evening Bruce cherished, the calm between the chaos of filming, teaching, training, and everything else that filled his days. Then, knock, 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 3 sharp raps on the door. Bruce glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:47 p.m., late for a social visit. Too late for students. Wrong time for good news. He set down his teacup carefully and walked to the door, his senses already sharpening, his body instinctively shifting into readiness. He looked through the peephole. Standing there was an older Chinese man, late 60s, maybe early 70s, wearing a worn gray jacket, a flat cap pulled low over his eyes, his face lined with age and worry. Bruce recognized him immediately, Mr. Chen, a quiet shopkeeper who ran a small grocery store on Waverly Place in Chinatown. Someone Bruce had helped years ago, when a group of thugs tried to shake him down for protection money. Bruce had simply shown up, spoken calmly to the thugs, and they'd never come back. Mr. Chen had never forgotten that kindness. Bruce opened the door. Sifu Lee, I'm sorry to come so late. His voice was trembling slightly. His eyes darted nervously down the hallway, as if checking to see if he'd been followed. Mr. Chen. What's wrong? The old man glanced around once more, then stepped inside quickly. Bruce closed the door behind him and led him to the small living room. Linda appeared in the doorway, concern on her face. Bruce, is everything okay? It's fine. Just give us a moment. She nodded and retreated, but Bruce could tell she was listening from the other room. Mr. Chen sat down on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped tightly together, his knuckles white. You embarrassed Vinnie Marcello today. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A fact that carried weight. Bruce sat across from him in a simple wooden chair. I didn't embarrass him. I gave him a choice. He doesn't see it that way, and neither does his boss. Bruce's expression darkened slightly, his jaw tightening. His boss. Mr. Chen nodded, his eyes filled with genuine fear, not for himself, but for Bruce. Anthony Lanza. You know the name. Everyone in the Bay Area knew the name. Anthony, Tony the Knife, Lanza, head of one of San Francisco's organized crime families. Illegal gambling operations, loan sharking protection rackets, rumors of bodies buried in the Oakland Hills, of witnesses who disappeared, of politicians and police who looked the other way. A man who ruled through fear and violence and money. Vinnie went crying to him tonight. Told him everything. Said you disrespected him in front of the whole community. Said you made him look weak in front of hundreds of people. Said you humiliated him at a funeral, of all places. Mr. Chen's voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper. And Tony doesn't forgive that kind of thing, Sifu. He can't afford to. If word gets out that someone stood up to his enforcer and walked away unpunished, it makes him look weak. It makes the whole organization look weak. And Tony doesn't forgive weakness. He doesn't forgive disrespect. He's putting a price on your head, Bruce. The room seemed to grow colder. Bruce's face remained calm, but his mind was already racing, calculating, planning, assessing threats. A price? Not to kill you. No, that would make you a martyr. That would make things worse. The community would rally around your memory. You'd become a symbol. Mr. Chen's hands were shaking now. He wants you broken. Publicly. Violently. He wants you crippled so badly that you can never fight again. Never teach again. Never inspire anyone again. He wants to make an example out of you so complete, so brutal, that no one in Chinatown ever thinks they can stand up to his guys again. The words hung in the air like smoke. Bruce was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, thinking. Then he asked, very calmly, his voice steady as stone, how much time do I have? Maybe a week. Maybe less. They're bringing in someone from out of state. Someone who specializes in this kind of work. Fighter. Worse. Mr. Chen looked up, his eyes glistening with unshaded tears. A butcher. They're bringing in Dmitry Volkov. You've heard of him. Bruce had. The Siberian. Ex-Soviet military. Underground fight circuits from Moscow to New York. A man who'd killed 2 opponents in unsanctioned matches. Not by accident, but because he enjoyed it. A man who'd crippled a dozen more, left them in wheelchairs, destroyed their lives for money. A man who didn't fight for sport or honor. He fought to destroy. Mr. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. Please, Sifu. Leave town. Take your family. Go to Hong Kong. Go back to Los Angeles. Go anywhere. These people, they don't fight fair. They don't care about honor or rules or witnesses. They'll do whatever it takes. Bruce stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. A streetlight flickered. A car passed slowly. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that just a few miles away, violence was being planned. If I run, they'll just find someone else to make an example of. Someone who can't defend themselves. Some young kid who looks up to me, who tries to stand up the way I did, and gets destroyed for it. But you're not responsible for. Bruce turned back, his eyes intense, burning with quiet conviction. Yes, I am by. I chose to stand up. I chose to walk into that funeral with my head high. I chose to give Vinnie that red envelope in front of everyone. And if I run now, if I disappear when things get dangerous, I teach everyone watching that fear wins. That bullies always win. That the only safe choice is to bow and submit. So what will you do? Bruce smiled, a small, dangerous smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to be ready. Comment below, run or stad. What would you do if a mob put a target on your back? And drop A if you believe standing for what's right is worth the risk. Dmitry lunged first, a heavy, powerful right hook designed to crush bone, to end fights before they began. The kind of punch that had hospitalized amateur fighters, that had shattered jaws and orbital bones, that carried 280 pounds of muscle and malice behind it. Bruce slipped it, not by much. Just enough. His head moved maybe 3 inches to the left, and Dmitry's fist whistled past his ear, cutting through empty air, the displacement of air brushing against Bruce's cheek. Dmitry followed immediately with a left hook, practiced, mechanical, brutal. Bruce slipped that too. Then came a knee, driving upward toward Bruce's ribs, meant to crack them like dry wood. Bruce pivoted, turned his body, let it pass harmlessly by. Then came a wild elbow swinging like a sledgehammer. Bruce ducked under it, smooth as water flowing around stone. Dmitri was attacking with everything. Combinations he'd drilled 10,000 times. Techniques that had worked on dozens of opponents. Violence that had never failed him. But Bruce moved like he wasn't even there. Like he was reading Dmitri's mind before the thoughts became actions. Like he was dancing to music only he could hear. After 10 seconds, Dmitri was already breathing hard, his combination slowing just slightly. After 20 seconds, frustration flickered across his face, his eyes narrowing, his jaw clenching. After 30 seconds, he made a mistake. He overcommitted on a right cross, putting all his weight behind it, lunging forward with too much confidence. Too much rage. Bruce saw it coming like slow motion. He stepped inside the punch, close enough to feel Dmitri's breath, close enough to count his heartbeats. And he struck. A phoenix eye fist, a single knuckle punch, directly into Dmitri's floating rib on the right side. Not a wild haymaker, not a showy kick. Just precise, scientific, devastating force concentrated into 1 square inch of bone. Dmitri's eyes went wide. The air rushed out of his lungs in a violent gasp. Bruce didn't stop there. In the same motion, he swept Dmitri's lead leg, the one carrying all his weight, the one he'd planted to stabilize himself. The giant crashed to the floor like a felled tree. The concrete basement floor shook. Dust rose in small clouds. The single light bulb swayed overhead, casting moving shadows across the walls. Dmitri lay there, gasping, clutching his ribs, staring up at the ceiling in shock and pain. Bruce didn't follow up. Didn't stomp on him. Didn't kick him while he was down. Didn't gloat or trash talk or celebrate. He simply stepped back, his breathing still controlled, still calm, and said quietly, "Get up." Dmitri turned his head, staring at Bruce with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Get up. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to show you something." For a moment, Dmitri didn't move. He just lay there, processing what had just happened, how easily he'd been taken down, how completely he'd been outclassed. Then pride kicked in. Rage. The muscle memory of 100 brutal fights. He rose slowly, painfully, one hand still pressed against his ribs. Fury burned in his eyes now, not the cold. Professional violence he'd walked in with, but something hotter, more desperate. "You got lucky." "Did I?" Dmitri didn't answer. He just charged. This time with everything he had, no technique, no strategy, just raw animal aggression. A wild overhand right, a lunging tackle. Pure brute force meant to overwhelm, to crush, to destroy. Bruce sidestepped like a matador avoiding a bull. He redirected Dmitri's momentum with a simple palm strike to the shoulder, using the man's own weight and speed against him. Dmitri slammed into the concrete wall with a sickening thud. His forehead hit first, then his shoulder, then his hip. He bounced off and stumbled backward, dazed, blinking, trying to clear his vision. Bruce stood in the center of the room, hands at his sides, not even in a fighting stance anymore. "You're strong. You're trained. You've won a lot of fights. But you're fighting angry. And anger makes you blind. It makes you predictable. It makes you weak." Dmitri roared, a sound of pure frustration and wounded pride, and lunged a third time. This time, Bruce didn't evade. He met Dmitri head on, caught his right wrist mid-punch with his left hand, fingers wrapping around Dmitri's wrist like iron. Stepped to the side, twisted the wrist outward, and applied a standing wrist lock, a simple technique from Wing Chun, a foundational move Bruce had practiced 10,000 times. Not hard enough to break the joint, not vicious enough to shatter bone, but hard enough to stop. Dmitri froze instantly, his entire body locking up. Pain shot up his arm like electricity. His shoulder screamed. His elbow felt like it was about to separate. Any more pressure and something would snap, tendon, ligament, bone. He didn't know which and didn't want to find out. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His free hand hovered in the air, uncertain whether to strike or surrender. Bruce leaned in close, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to be their weapon. You have a choice." For the first time since entering the basement, Dmitri's eyes showed something other than rage or confidence or professional detachment. Confusion. Maybe even shame. Bruce continued, his voice steady, almost gentle. "You think you're powerful because you can hurt people. Because you can break them. Because people fear you. But that's not power. That's just loneliness. You're alone, Dmitri. You're always alone. Because fear doesn't create loyalty. It doesn't create friendship. It doesn't create anything except more fear. Dimitri's jaw trembled. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something breaking inside. They paid you to destroy me, but I'm giving you something they never will. I'm giving you a way out. Bruce released the wrist lock. Dimitri stumbled backward, clutching his arm, staring at Bruce like he was seeing him for the first time. I'm gonna walk out of here now, Bruce said calmly. You can try to stop me. You can report back to Tony Lanza that you completed the job, that you broke me, that you did what you were paid to do. He walked slowly toward the door, his eyes never leaving Dimitri's. Or you can let me go and tell them the truth, that you had me cornered, alone, helpless. But you chose mercy. You chose to be more than just their weapon. Bruce reached the door, put his hand on the handle. Then he turned back one last time. If they ask what happened, tell them this Bruce Lee didn't beat you. He gave you a way out. What you do with it, that's up to you. Dimitri stood there in the middle of the basement, breathing hard, his body aching, his mind racing. His whole life, he'd been told that strength meant dominance. That power meant fear. That survival meant being the most violent man in the room. But this man, this small, calm man who just dismantled him in 40 seconds, was offering him something different. A choice. Not between winning and losing. Between who he was and who he could be. Bruce opened the door and walked out into the night. The cool air hit his face. The rain had stopped. The street was quiet. Behind him he heard no footsteps, no shouts, no attacks, just silence. He walked to his car, got in, and drove home to his family. 2 days later, Dmitri Volkov left San Francisco, no explanation, no forwarding address, no goodbyes. He went to the bus station, bought a one-way ticket, and disappeared. Some say he went back to Russia, to the small village he'd left as a young man. Others say he became a boxing coach for at-risk youth in Detroit, teaching kids discipline instead of destruction. A few claimed they saw him working construction in Seattle, living quietly, keeping to himself. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone who knew the story, everyone who heard the whispers from the men who'd been stationed outside that basement door, agreed on one thing. Dmitri Volkov never took another mob contract again. He'd walked into that basement as a weapon. He'd walked out as a man, and it was Bruce Lee who'd given him that gift, not through violence, through mercy. Type MAR-CY in the comments if you believe the greatest victories are the ones where nobody has to lose. So why was this story never reported? Why didn't it make the newspapers? Why wasn't it in the biographies? Why didn't Hollywood turn it into a movie scene? Because it didn't fit the narrative. The media wanted Bruce Lee the action star, the fighter. The man who kicked through walls and fought 100 men at once. The invincible warrior who never lost, who never backed down, who solved every problem with his fists. That's what sold tickets. That's what built legends. That's what people wanted to believe. But the real Bruce Lee, he understood something deeper. Something more powerful than any flying kick or one-inch punch. He understood that violence is easy. It's restraint that takes mastery. That fear is loud, dramatic, attention-grabbing. But respect is silent. Respect is earned through character, not through cruelty. That breaking a man's body proves nothing except that you're willing to break bodies. But changing his mind, changing his heart, giving him a reason to choose a different path, that's power. Real, lasting, transformational power. The kind of power that doesn't fade when the cameras turn off. The kind that doesn't require an audience to validate it. The kind that changes the world one person at a time, quietly, without fanfare. Bruce didn't need to destroy Dmitri to win. He needed to show him there was another way, and in doing so, he didn't just save himself from a brutal beating, he saved Dmitri from a brutal life. The mob didn't come for Bruce again after that night. Not because they were afraid he'd win in a fight, but because they realized something far more dangerous. He'd already won. He'd shown an entire community that you don't need to throw a punch to stand your ground. That honor isn't about dominance or intimidation, or making people fear you. It's about discipline. About choosing who you want to be, even when no one's watching, even when violence would be easier, even when you have every right to hurt someone. Word spread through Chinatown in whispers. The shopkeepers who'd been paying protection money started asking questions, started wondering why they had to live in fear. The young men who'd been recruited into street gangs started thinking twice, started asking themselves if there was another path. The families who'd stayed silent for years started believing that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to bow anymore. Bruce Lee never tried to become a symbol. He never positioned himself as a leader or a revolutionary. He just lived his principles, and people noticed. Real strength isn't measured by how many people fear you. It's measured by how many people you inspire, not through speeches or slogans or grand gestures, but through moments like these. Quiet moments. Moments when you choose the harder path because it's the right path. Moments when you show mercy to someone who deserves punishment. Moments when you walk away from a fight you could easily win. Moments when you give someone a choice instead of a beating. Bruce Lee passed away on July 20th, 1973, at just 32 years old. Far too young, far too soon. The world mourned a legend and icon. A martial artist who'd changed cinema, who'd broken barriers, who'd made millions of people believe they could be strong too. But the lesson he left in that San Francisco basement, that lived on in ways his movies never could. It lived on in the kids who saw him walk away from a fight at the funeral and realized that courage doesn't always look like confrontation. It lived on in the students he taught, not just how to punch and kick, but how to think, how to adapt, how to be like water. It lived on in Dmitry Volkov, wherever he ended up, carrying the memory of the night someone gave him mercy instead of revenge. It lives on in all of us, decades later, who still repeat his words. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Be like water, my friend. The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. And maybe the most important one, the one he lived that night in the basement. A good martial artist does not become tense, but ready. Not thinking, yet not dreaming. Ready for whatever may come. So here's my question for you, watching this right now. When life puts a bully in front of you, when someone tries to provoke you, disrespect you, challenge you to prove yourself through violence, when you have every right, every justification, every excuse to strike back, will you react with your fists? Or will you respond with something they'll never forget? Will you choose the easy path? Or the right one? Will you prove your strength? Or will you prove your character? Because here's the truth Bruce Lee understood. Anyone can throw a punch. Anyone can win a fight. Anyone can dominate through fear. But it takes a master to walk away. It takes a warrior to choose peace. It takes real strength to give mercy when you could give pain. Type respite in the comments if Bruce Lee taught you something today. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to personally thank every single person here who believes strength is more than muscle, who believes honor is more than pride, who believes that real power is quiet. And let me know what part of this story hit you hardest. Was it the moment at the funeral when Bruce handed Vinny the red envelope? Was it the warning from Mr. Chen when Bruce chose to stand instead of run? Was it the basement fight when Bruce could have destroyed Dmitry but chose to teach him instead? Was it the ending when Dmitry walked away from his old life? Your feedback helps me bring you even better stories. It helps me understand what matters to you, what moves you, what inspires you. Because there are so many untold legends out there, so many buried truths, so many moments the world forgot or never knew about in the first place. Moments when ordinary people made extraordinary choices. Moments when warriors chose wisdom over warfare. Moments when the quiet decision changed everything. And we will remember them. More stories like this are coming. Stories about people who chose character over convenience. Stories about moments that never made the headlines but changed lives forever. Stories that remind us what real strength looks like. And I promise you, they'll be worth the wait. Until then, stay strong, stay humble, stay wise, keep choosing the harder path when it's the right path. Keep showing mercy when you have the power to show cruelty. Keep being the person who changes minds instead of breaking bodies. And never forget, real power doesn't shout, it whispers. Real strength doesn't destroy, it transforms. Real warriors don't just win fights, they change lives. That's what Bruce Lee did in that basement. That's what he did at that funeral. That's what he did every day of his too short life. And that's what we can do too, if we choose to follow his example. Not the Hollywood version, the real one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about these stories. More are coming soon. Stay legendary.